Welcome. In the last few decades, there has been significant growth and interest among a diverse community of mental health professionals and healing artists who are curious about the impacts and possibilities of body-inclusive therapies and mindfulness practices in general. We are seeing an increased awareness of trauma, its prevalence, and how to address the multi-layered impacts of trauma for a variety of communities, including veterans, survivors of domestic violence, individuals struggling with addiction, people who are incarcerated, refugees, and children. There is a clear recognition that trauma can have an impact on the whole organism of the human person, and that some of the more conventional practices we've relied on for decades haven't been able to effectively resolve trauma. We are also making a shift from treating trauma and pain as private problems to recognizing that when one individual struggles with trauma's residue, it affects their family, their colleagues, and their community. It is truly our collective responsibility to find ways to understand, support, and create possibilities for healing for one another, as well, of course, to examine and repair the systems and inequities that create the conditions for trauma to occur in the first place. This shift could be also understood as a return to a pre-modern way of actively engaging with community and cultivating interpersonal connections and care for one another. In the last section, we talked about the impacts of trauma on the brain and therefore the nervous system. We explored how it is that during a traumatic event and for some time afterwards, the three primary layers of the brain are impacted. The cognitive or thinking part of the brain, which is in charge of communication and language comprehension, may be offline and unavailable. The limbic or emotional brain is charged with constant vigilance, like a bodyguard for our whole being that is working around the clock. The deepest and oldest part of the brain, the reptilian brain, continues to communicate with us through sensation that can be confusing and overwhelming, and it may come out of nowhere. Suddenly, we may be flooded with a cascade of physiological responses that bring us back into what feels like the epicenter of trauma. It makes sense when we look at the brain during and after trauma as to why conventional talk therapy has either failed to help some people heal the effects of post-traumatic stress, and also why many trauma survivors feel like psychotherapy and the pressure to tell their story may escalate and re-traumatize them. It comes with its own unique risks and, for some people, barriers. The shift we are seeing towards body-inclusive therapies recenters a trauma survivor within their own recovery process. The therapy community is listening to their feedback and studying what trauma survivors report helps them to heal. There is significant research happening right now on the benefits of yoga, movement, and meditation, and other alternative healing practices. This research will help to strengthen social and political investment into making yoga, mindfulness, and movement practices more readily accessible to the trauma survivor population.